a saying in any kind of business. It's going to cost twice as much you think it's going to cost. It's going to take twice as long you think it's going to take, and you're not the exception.
Remember, bank accounts just lose money every month to inflation, so you have to actually deploy it. Interest rates can be very, very critical to your deal.
Welcome to the REI Partners Meetup. We're your hosts, Matt Morrow and Richard Clark. This is a place where knowledge is shared, friends collaborate, as we help each other to succeed in both our real estate and personal goals. We are a group of like-minded individuals from across the country who are here to help and support each other. Investors, realtors, entrepreneurs, and many others contribute to providing diverse and practical content for our events, especially our mentors who enjoy helping new and experienced investors in their journeys. Thanks for joining. We hope you enjoy the show and encourage you to bring others who may find value as we invest in our collective future.
Hey guys, welcome to REI Partners. We Saturday, October 15th in the afternoon. Not a huge call today, but everybody watches afterwards. Thanks for joining. REI Partners, we got about 120 people on the mailing list now. Not everybody's involved as the people are on now, but we are growing pretty quickly. We got our website, Facebook group, email. If you know anybody who's interested in real estate investing, this is the group to refer them to if they can't be in a certain place at a certain time. Maybe one day in in-person meetings, but for now, virtual is working really well for everybody. So we have George Naef on. He is an investor in the Lehigh Valley, and he's going to teach everybody about his experience and some information about Cashflow Killers. I'm pretty excited about this. He's put a lot of work into this presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to George. This is George Naef.
All right, awesome. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here and get the presentation uploaded. All right, so yes, Cashflow Killers. I think it's aptly named for Halloween. It's what are some killers in your cash flow? And there's a couple different things that I'm going to be going over. The biggest thing that I guess newer investors think is that, you're just kind of getting a check, sitting back, doing nothing, and all that money is yours to play with. And unfortunately, it's not. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on this call wish it was, but there are, different expenses that you have to pay for as a landlord. There are certain things that can come up in your life that will definitely take away from the money that you're getting in. And so it's all about finding a good deal and what that means. And just a couple of different things on here will help you kind of save you while you're looking at that good deal or what you think is a good deal, just to make sure you don't go over like your cash flow. What I mean by cash flow is how much money you're going to be basically getting paid at the end of, whether you do it quarterly, monthly, yearly, how much money you're going to have left over for that. So just to kind of jump into it, one of the first things that can definitely kill your cash flow are, bad tenants, right? So if you don't have any income, you have no cash flow. We were just at another investor meeting the other day, and one of the guys that was speaking kind of summed it up perfectly. You want to develop good relationships with your tenant, whether you're doing it yourself or you're having a property manager. You want to make sure your property manager does the same thing. If you don't have those good relationships with the tenants, bad things can happen. And if you don't actually vet your tenants correctly, it could definitely impact your cash flow. So like a couple of bad things that like red flags that you're looking out for, it could be things like, if a person is really trying to get in to a home really, really quickly, that could be a bad sign because usually when somebody's rushed or you never really do your due diligence when you are rushed. So you don't want to be in that situation, especially if you're a new investor, because that rush could cost you a lot of heartache later after the lease is signed. So just an example of this, I actually used to work in the telecom space, right? And I used to actually sell phones. We had people that would come in and there'd be fraudsters because you would pay just the sales tax of the phone, they would have somebody else's, social security information, and that they would run off with the phone for the sales tax and get $1,000 phone and sell it somewhere on the black market. A lot of people would do that. And so, whenever I saw somebody like in a rush, trying to put a lot of cash down or something like that was one of the things that would come up with me. And I kind of took that into real estate and saw that. So when you're doing your due diligence, make sure you're looking at W-2s, make sure that you don't just call their references, you do your due diligence online and make sure that the last person that they've been talking to, the last landlord that they've had basically, is legit. Sometimes it could be a friend, right? So make sure you do diligence on that. I mean, you could even just pay for something simple like white pages, and you can go look the phone number up and you'll find out who the actual name is. It could be, their friend, right? You never know who it is. So I'm also going to pass it off to Matt really quick. Do you have anything where you've had some bad tenants or any stories that you may have where, that's kind of killed your cash flow?
Yeah, so bad tenants can definitely, can you hear me here?
Yes.
All right. So bad tenants can absolutely cause a cash flow issue because what's happening is bad tenants become no payment eventually or late payment. By the very definition, cash flow is the net positive at the end or negative after your income and expenses. The remainder is cash flow. If you don't get paid, you're not going to get any cash flow in the positive. It's going to be negative. So every investor who's in this long enough is going to have experience with people not paying on time, not paying in full, not paying at all. And all of those go into different paths of how you're going to deal with these people. Thankfully, evictions are very, very low. They are very expensive when they do happen. So you try to avoid that scenario. And you can do that by a few different ways. You can identify that a person is going to become a problem tenant financially by their application. That's why we talked about, filtering these people within the law and within fair housing, getting tenants who are going to be able to pay you on time and in full. However, life happens. And we all know that those people might have a loss in their family, lost their job. And if they pay late, sometimes it's okay and they recoup and they move on. And there's a few people from our meetup right now who are dealing with tenants who are not reliable at paying, not paying at all. And it's a pretty damn trying time for investors, especially new investors. But the people that you filter, they pass all the checks and shit happens, right? We get it. So if you have someone who's paying late and they're still paying, you might not have a cash flow problem right away, but you can expect to have one in the future because it's very difficult for people who live on a paycheck to paycheck basis to catch up once you're behind. If you have someone who doesn't pay at all, totally different story. And to answer your question, George, the one that I'll just give you an example of here, we have a 5-unit in the town that I live in. One of the tenants who's no longer there started having payment problems, but they conveniently started having payment problems once one of the family members started having drug problems, and the police were there a lot, and it became not a good scenario to the point where when their lease was over, it just wasn't going to be renewed. And for me, as a decent person and as a community member in the same town they live in, it really sucked to have that hard conversation with them. Like, look, your lease is just not going to be renewed. We did receive payment eventually. However, in order to ensure that they moved out on time, because I saw the writing on the wall of, well, we can't find a place, we're just going to stay here, and up yours, we're gonna live here without payment. I encourage them to be out on time through what's called cash for keys. And even though cash flow was negative the last month, we lost money because we didn't get paid in full. And I actually gave them their security deposit plus extra money to leave on time with a perfectly clean house. And it works. It works all the time because people in that position have now a motivation to get out on time. So that's an example of something that we used. We identified that we were going to have a problem with tenants paying on time, and we encouraged them to get out before we had to go through the eviction process. you can almost always avoid eviction with people who are motivated by money, which nearly all renters are. So that's just one example. Does anybody else on the call have another example for George? Nobody? All right.
I think that is a good example, and that kind of goes back to, what we were first talking about, is developing some sort of relationship with tenants. In that case, it was a brand new relationship. It's not like you inherited the tenants, but there are ways you can develop relationships, and that was certainly a money relationship. But as you develop and you have the ability to choose after that, and you can get a better tenant in place, something that would be more better for your business. So what I also want to kind of show you, like, where we're looking at this from a analysis standpoint. So this right here is just a hypothetical property analysis of basically a unicorn deal in Lehigh Valley at the moment. So don't get too strange about the numbers, but let's just call it 123 Main Street in Bethlehem, and let's just say it's a duplex, right? Let's just pretend you put down $200,000. The home costs $200,000, about $8,000 in closing costs, and just a little bit of renovations. Maybe it didn't need much, and you're all in for $210,000. We're talking about the income here, right? So I have this as yearly income. This is $1,300 a month per unit. So 2 bedroom, 1 bath, each unit, $15,600 per unit gets you your gross income. That's where most people actually stop that aren't educated in real estate investing. They think that this is the amount of money that they're going to get coming in, but it's not, right? If you're paying a property manager, you have to pay a property manager. When I underwrite my own deals, I always pretend that I have a property manager, because at some point I'm going to want to have a property manager. So it's better to write that in now, and then you're basically paying yourself as a property manager until you eventually pass the baton to them. And that's in my long-term plan. Then you have your taxes, insurance, maintenance, and capital expenditures. The biggest difference between, I would say, maintenance and CapEx would be when you're maintaining the property, right? Maybe you're mowing the lawn. Maybe there's a leaky pipe. Maybe there is, something that just needs to be fixed but not replaced. That's more in the maintenance category. Capital expenditures, on the other hand, would be when something needs to be fully replaced. So think about, ripping out a bathroom and making a whole new bathroom. That's a capital expenditure. Ripping off a roof. Maybe you need your furnace replaced or oil tank replaced. That's considered capital expenditures on the sheet. If you're paying some sort of common electric, I was just thinking $100, right? This is very hypothetical, right? I would definitely get some numbers here. If you have a water bill, over where I live, we actually do sewer and garbage together, which is where usually you would have water and sewer and then garbage be separate, but that's the way we do it here. If you have any kind of rental permits, right? So all these expenses, they take down your net operating income, and your net operating income divided by, if you were to pay the house in cash, total gets you something called a cap rate. And so the reason why people use leverage is because if you actually utilize it, maybe with a 20% down payment, with all things being equal, I did a mortgage at 7%, which is about what mortgages are kind of going for right now, which hurts, especially last year. You can get something called a cash on cash return. So I wanted to do a real high level. This is not what this is about. This is about cash flow killers, but what we're talking about here is on the income side. So when we're talking about bad tenants, let's just say a bad tenant costs you, maybe they damage the property, and then it takes you 6 months to rent. Well, let's say that $15,600 gets cut in half. Let me just do the math on that real quick. 15,600 divided by 2 is 7,800. And maybe maybe you had to do some extra capital expenditures. Maybe now you paid $3,000 for this, right? So all of a sudden your cash on cash return is now negative. So all of a sudden you had a pretty bad year as far as the cash flow sheet is concerned. So these are what happens when you're when you're having these things. This is why you want them to be avoided, right? So that's just one example. I kind of wanted to show you how that really affects the numbers too, on something just hypothetical for you guys. Any questions on these on the sheet?
That's a really, really good overview of all of these items. That's the way you presented that was perfect, George, especially like the cash on cash return, equating that amount to a similar investing in other asset classes, whether it be money market, stocks, precious metals. When you're looking at investing in real estate, that's the number you're looking at, right? The same cash put into real estate versus the same cash put into widgets. That's really the number that matters. And as soon as you take cash flow away because of any reason, not just bad tenants or a capex, it becomes maybe not a great investment, right? Just some things to consider, but nicely done.
No, thank you.
I think Kevin is asking if he can check out that sheet.
I will absolutely forward it to you. No
Okay.
problem.
Awesome.
I like your idea of including the property manager in the initial layout of the spreadsheet. That's a very good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of is like when you're thinking about building any kind of business, you want to think not only what you're thinking like this year, you want to think about 5-10 years down the road where you could be. And so you don't want to box yourself in and have a property where, well, now I have to pay a property manager and all of a sudden it's not cash flowing correctly. You got to think ahead of there. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Let me see. All right, let me see if I can get this screen out of here. All right. So let's kind of go over the rest of this here. All right, so let's talk about remodels. Now, remodels could be great different things. They could definitely add value to your property, right? And there are plenty of other presentations talking about really good remodels. We're going to talk about some things that could really hurt your cash flow. The first thing that you have to be on the lookout for are bad contractors, right? In every industry, you're going to have really, really great people. And then you're also going to have people that are going to want to take advantage of you for being a new investor, or even if you're a more experienced investor, maybe, you just never had to deal with the contractor part of it. Maybe that wasn't your role in if you're in some sort of partnership. Understanding contractors and how that works is completely needed. So not every contractor is a quote unquote bad contractor, right? Some could just maybe know how to work with homeowners and that's their contracting business. What you really want is a contractor who knows how to work with landlords, who know how to work with people that are trying to save money. And part of that goes into, rental grade versus traditional construction. There are different types of properties out there. A class, B class, C class. You're not too many newer investors going to jump right into an A class property situation. And what that means is that you're not trying to do, marble countertops or something fancy. You're trying to make something that can take a lot of wear and tear. It doesn't have to be the cheapest material, right? There's always, the difference between, cheap and good, but you also don't want to overpay for really, really expensive materials that are eventually going to break because this is when you have tenants, they're more likely to not treat it as if it's like their own home. Some treat it great, but you kind of want to plan for the worst, hope for the best in that kind of situation. So getting the good rental grade materials versus construction costs, through traditional, getting good rental grade materials versus, again, traditional construction is going to be one of the things you want to talk about with a bad contractor, right? Other things that to note is that you don't want to give contractors, no contractor really does this anyway, unless, it's usually a red flag if they want everything done up front. Now, I understand, some have, deposits and everything, but if they're asking for 100% of it up front, that's usually some sort of a red flag. Because even if they're going to go and do a good job on your property, they're probably going to be lower on the priority list. They're going to be chasing after other people trying to get some money, because from a contractor's point of view, they've already been paid. So just in as far as behavior is concerned, that you're going to be lower on their priority list. So make sure that you you basically don't pay them up front completely. Make sure that you walk through and that they can explain things in the way you can understand them. Make sure that you actually get everything in writing, right? Because, then it just becomes some sort of he said, she said situation, and you don't want that. And then obviously you don't want to go completely cheap on the repairs too. You want to make sure something gets repaired correctly and that it'll be good for the next 5 years. Now, if you think you're going to be obviously replacing that material, let's say you're going to be replacing a sink and you just need like a 1 or 2 year fix, it doesn't have to be the greatest repair. But if it's a new system that's in there and maybe just something wasn't done right and it gets repaired wrong, that's going to cost you money, especially if it has to deal with water. Water damage can absolutely become a really, really big problem, where there could be some sort of slow leak that you don't see building up mold and everything like that. That's something you want to you definitely don't want that happening to you. So is there anybody who's had an experience with a contractor where something that was supposed to be done didn't get done, and maybe they didn't fix it in the right way?
A lot. A lot. And I'm sure other guys on the call as well have their own, and I know one specifically has one very recently, where I'll just give you a few quick pieces of additional information for this. Another item that would be important to consider with remodels or repairs in general are realistic timeline of the repairs. If the guy's promised you a full gut rehab in 2 weeks, unless he has a team of 15 guys, it's not going to happen. Being realistic with your timelines when you have a property that is lacking cash flow is extremely important. If you're buying a flip or a burr style property, these are called holding costs. When you have time on a calendar where you're not getting any income from tenants, whether it's during rehab or refinance phase, you have to have an accurate scope of work from a time perspective as well, because that could burn you. If you have a property that you buy, you need to do XYZ repairs, and then you're going to rent it in 30 days. If you don't rent it in 30 days, you might as well take off whatever your rental cost was. Oh, by the way, it's not just your lost rent per month, it's your utilities, it's your taxes, it's everything that now you're paying, the tenant is not. It adds up very, very quickly. Always plan long, double your timeline, and then work backwards if you have to. Our suggestion with contractors, something we've learned, is you're the one bringing the business. Having a contractor who's immediately available is also a red flag, but it's not a total negative. They might just have a lull, and having someone who is able to drop what they're doing and help you in an emergency also holds value. If you're able to work with your contractor in 3 equal payments, first, in the beginning, upfront, get materials. A lot of the contractors work on a job-to-job basis, similar to paycheck to paycheck, and they might not have all the funds there to be able to provide materials. They need something to get going, and you'd never expect to do a job and not get paid a little bit for it in the beginning. So a third, maybe another deposit, 2/3 of the way through, and then the last third, which is their profit margin of the whole thing. That's the key part. Their profit of the job. They've already used all the materials to do the job. They don't get that last piece, which is their profit, until you are 100% certified and happy with the job. You walk through with them. You go through and make sure that everything is done to your liking and to the way they wrote the quote. If it's not, don't get paid. Unfortunately, we've gotten burned. We'll get burned again. It's going to happen. That's how you learn. But on that, being meticulous with how you want the things done. If you need the wall a certain shade of blue, or if you need the steps a certain dimension and not, 8-inch steps versus 10-inch steps, right, Pop? You need to be explicitly clear from the beginning beforehand, because you never know what these guys are thinking or assuming. They all run by their own standard, even though the rule says this. They might all, and they all do, have different ways of doing it. And everyone is going to say the other one is wrong, but you have to make sure it's completely clear up front. So have realistic timeframes, split up your payments into equal payments, but don't give them their profit until you're completely satisfied. And then make sure you follow up. A good contractor will always refer you and vice versa. But if you have one that kind of goes downhill, it can be a real ugly relationship. So just some personal feelings there.
Thanks, Matt. I especially like the point where you said it's probably going to take twice as long as you think it's going to take. I mean, there's a saying in any kind of business, it's going to cost twice as much you think it's going to cost. It's going to take twice as long you think it's going to take. And, you're not the exception, is the third rule. So to any new investor out there, just know that even if you do end up having a good contractor, maybe you didn't do a good job because you're new to the business and not pointing out the right things, right? And so one of the things that could happen is maybe you thought it was just replacing this certain thing, and then the contractor then demos it, and then all of a sudden it's a much bigger problem than originally thought. And communication on that case is completely clear. So especially when you're ripping out walls or doing the more advanced stuff, a lot of times you just don't know what's out there or what's behind it. And not every contractor is trying to steal your money. So I don't want to say like all contractors are bad or anything like that. So from that perspective, just know that worse things could happen because unexpected things come up with these things all the time.
Yeah, and it's like the three-sided triangle. You could have things good quality, you could have them in fast time, or you can have them for cheap money. You can't have all three.
Yep.
And a contractor who's cheap might not be fast. A contractor who's, good quality might not be prompt. Being professional and being able to work with people, especially in tenant-occupied properties. There's one guy we used. Work is fantastic. Cannot stick to a schedule. Something always comes up. The only time he ever was used for us in recent past has been vacant property, because he can't be relied on. Works great, but you bring up a lot of really, really good points, and remodels and repairs in general can be a huge killer to your cash flow.
Absolutely.
One bad repair is a whole year of cash flow. So
Yep, and it's good to prepare for that too. So when we're talking about capital expenditures on that other sheet, while I may not be paying that $1,500 every single year, right? There will be that time where the roof needs to be replaced for $10,000. There will be that time where maybe some water damage was hitting that, and then all of a sudden you have to take all the framing out and replace the rotted wood that's been back there because no one knew about that. Those things will come up, and so that's why maybe you're not paying that capital expenditures, but I would even say have some sort of separate account where you can stash away some money for when those expenditures come up, because they will. It's part of being a landlord, and making sure you have enough padding to your own finances is definitely going to help you, and as opposed to taking it out on a credit card for 24% interest or something like that. So speaking of which, leverage. There we go. So that was a nice transition. I wasn't even expecting that one. So let's talk about how leverage can also kill your cash flow, right? And just to let everybody know, we're in a higher interest rate environment compared to last year. Last year, a lot of the rates were around the 3%, maybe even 4%, depending on the type of home loans that you were getting. But now that sort of leverage is higher. And what's happened to the real estate market? Well, it's it's still gone up in value. So Matt, when you were saying it's a really hard time to be a newer investor, what I've been telling people now newer investors that I talk to is, now is actually probably one of the best times to learn. So that way, when the right environment does come out, you can kind of have your ducks in a row and do that. So that's what this is used to help. So yes, it can be used to actually help your return or kill your return. So higher interest rates also equal a higher amount of risk that you have when you're doing a deal, because that eats up the cash flow. If you're using a higher leverage, if you're financing 90% of the property, it's definitely a higher risk than someone who's trying to finance 50% of the property. And even on cash out refinances, you have to, whenever you're refinancing a home, it's not just, hey, let's just, switch this deal and be good. There are fees that you usually have to pay against your loan provider. And even nowadays, if you've locked in a really, really low rate, if you get a higher interest rate, that's going to also kill your cash flow, because now if you do a cash out refinance, that same 3% loan is now 7%. So that's why a lot of people are not refinancing now, because it doesn't make too much sense. And just to kind of show you what I mean here, let me see. Back 10. Okay. So let's just say this mortgage, let's just go and play around with the mortgage calculator real quick here. So if we just type in mortgage calculator on here, and that loan was for what? $200,000 purchase price. So let's just call it $160,000 loan amount. And let's just say instead of 7%, now we're at 8% interest. So that is $1,174, 1174 times 12. And now instead of $12,828, you're paying $14,088. And what just happened is it ended up killing the cash on cash return. It's still, you're still cash flowing positive in this specific situation, but now your cash on cash went from over 10%, which on this one I have as green, because for my underwriting, I want to see a 10% cash and cash return or greater. It's gone into a negative for me because it's under that 10% value for myself. So that's just one reason to say, like, oh, if your interest rates are 1% higher, all of a sudden now your cash flow has been killed. So that's just one of the other pieces you have to look for when you're underwriting your deals. Anybody have specific thoughts, or maybe something they've run into where maybe they thought they were getting a great deal, but then when they had to run their numbers again with a lender, maybe now it wasn't looking so great?
I'll keep bringing up stuff if you're cool with
it. Okay. No, thank you.
With leverage, it's either you buy it with cash or you buy it with somebody else's cash. If you have the money sitting around and you can do it, great. But the opportunity cost of using that money in this one singular investment has to be better than using someone else's money. So if you can get a 15 or 20% return on using your cash in this purchase, use your own cash. But if you can also get a 15% return on a much smaller amount of cash using a bank's money, it makes sense to do that. So you can multiply that and use your cash for more things. Doing a refinance now is not a great idea for some variables, but you might have an opportunity to cash out refi one of your properties or use a HELOC to buy something else that's going to bring in much higher returns than the cost of you borrowing money. For example, we refinanced one of our buildings last year. The original purchase price, our interest rate was 2.9 on a $190,000 mortgage. We refinanced it to the rate of 4.5, which is still a 1.5, right? It's not a ton, but it was still a much higher interest rate at the time. Payments go up, but what we did
is we pulled $150,000 out of that property tax-free and deployed that 150,000 into several others at the same time. So that extra 1.5 of interest that we paid by pulling it out on a refinance is such a good, worthwhile investment for us versus having that money just sit in there. Because 4.1 or whatever the rate is now is still a great rate. When you're up at the higher numbers, there's guys right now getting quoted 7 to 10% for some of these products. If you're using a debt service coverage loan, where it doesn't use your personal income to verify, those loans are on the higher end, 8, 9, 10%. You're not going to want to or be able to refinance out of that. Prepayment penalties start coming in when you buy a loan now, because the bank wants their interest. They want to get paid for the first few years. And if you pay back your loan by selling it or refinancing it with another bank, they're going to whap you with a huge fees, because right now is when the banks make their money. Interest rates are on the rise. They're not ridiculous yet. Historically, they're still pretty good, but leverage is extremely, extremely important. But don't be afraid of refinance, either using a HELOC or a cash out refinance, if what you're doing with that money is going to be a higher and better use than what you're doing right now. We actually have to do it. If you pull out that money and sit it in a bank account, remember, bank accounts just lose money every month to inflation. So you have to actually deploy it. Interest rates can be very, very critical to your deal. And there's a few, I know Matt just joined on the call here. We were talking about interest rates with his pre-qualification, and it makes a huge difference in monthly payment. Like you made the example before on your spreadsheet, George, it is huge. So just make sure you know what you're getting into. Ask people about it. Ask your lender. Ask the lender to explain it to you. You know, go through the products. The banks are not all created equal. Local banks and credit unions give you the best deal, but they have super tough guidelines. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the world of leverage here. But
Yep. And banks also, they help you underwrite the deal too, but make sure that you're also running your own numbers, right? There's a saying, trust but verify, right? Verify the numbers for your own deal, and that's going to make you a better investor, a better, and you can actually start seeing some of these deals. You do that. If you look at that sheet that I had there, if you do that enough times and you go through enough properties, even if you're just kind of just doing some numbers on that, let's say you do that 10 times and you're a newer investor, all of a sudden you're going to start seeing a couple deals come up and you're going to be like, well, this one probably doesn't make sense for me. And that can give you a lot of your time back too, because if you're looking at all the properties that are coming on the market all the time and you're individually underwriting them, that can be tough. I mean, so just make sure, A, that you either gather some people around you that know what they're doing and that can help you out, and B, make sure that you understand what you're investing in. That's the biggest thing.
can I make a point of advice real quick, George?
Yeah.
There are some guys who are looking to wholesale on the call, and I know there's several wholesalers in our group. One of the things you can also best do, to George's point, is when you have a deal that you find, let's say you find an off-market property, you're going to wholesale or even do it yourself, you're going to invest in this property yourself. Run your own numbers over and over again in various forms to make sure they are true. If you see a property on the MLS for $200,000 and the rent is $3,000 a month for a single family home, something is wrong, right? The people who are listing the homes, whether it be wholesalers trying to offload property or sellers represented by agents, they're going to present the property in the absolute best light possible. Their expenses are going to be super low. Their income is going to be super high because they neglect to put the important stuff that's going to screw you in these numbers. Do your own research, find the things that you can find, and plan your own numbers. Your insurance rate for a building might be different than someone else's insurance rate that currently owns it and has owned it for 15 years. We just dealt with that on one we have under contract now. We thought insurance was going to be lower, but the guy who owns it's owned it forever, and his insurance is super low because he just fixes everything and never got a claim, right? But that's not the insurance rate now. Do your own research, trust but verify, as George said, in everything in this business. You need to make sure that the numbers you're expecting are worse than what's actually going to happen, and never believe other people's numbers, including stuff that agents send you. When I underwrite a property for investors, I do my own underwriting and I expect them to do the same, because that's the relationship we have. They come to the call, I come to the call with our own data, we compare it, and hopefully they're close. If they're not, we have to figure out what the wild card is. So trust but verify, extremely good point. Nice job.
I had to get myself off of mute. So I wanted to go over a couple other killers of cash flow here. We just, Matt, you just talked about one, insurance. Review that every year, right? If you actually, insurance rates do go up with inflation, but make sure you're shopping around. Maybe you don't have the best company. Maybe you don't, if you're doing one company, maybe use an insurance broker, because insurance brokers use a lot of different companies and can get you the best rates. Sometimes that could be, talk with industry experts, and don't just talk to one. I would say at least talk to three. Same thing with contractors, especially if you've never dealt with, talk to at least three of them. It's really good that you get a variety of different perspectives from that. Property managers, do your due diligence. Oh my goodness, can I tell you how many bad property managers there actually are out there? It's kind of crazy. They just want to, maybe they just don't know how to run a business, but there are plenty of bad ones out there. So make sure you vet some good ones. And the best thing you could do is just ask them a ton of questions. Make sure that talk to a couple of their clients. If you know some of the other people, that's what, getting around other networking groups with other investors, that's what that's all about. And make sure that, hey, how are these people actually doing? What have you heard? You can also check Google reviews as well. That's another way that could really help. Make sure they have a good amount of them and that they're, rated well on Google. And then tax increases, right? Tax increases are something to consider, especially when you're pulling permits, right? Whenever you pull permits for a property, what that means to the governing body. Now, we're here in Pennsylvania. That could be different everywhere, but just when it comes to county by county, usually when they see a permit pulled, that means that that's a signal to them that the value of the property is going up, and they're going to want to get a piece of the action at the new value of that property. So that can make your property taxes increase, and if property taxes increase, that's definitely going to eat into your cash flow. I think. Okay, never mind. Kevin was asking a question, but it looks like Matt answered it. That's awesome. So
it was a good question. When you're done with this slide, I want to mention something to Kevin because he could hear it. But
yeah, go ahead. I was actually about to ask you. Yeah.
So the chat, I'm not sure if it shows up in the video, but I'll answer Kevin's questions publicly so people can see. He made a good point. Can the profit and loss statements and 8825 tax forms clean up questions about cash flow and accurate expenses, so that when you're evaluating a property, you really see the real numbers? Yes, the answer is it will help. However, it's only as good as the information that people put into that program. Garbage in, garbage out. Nothing in, nothing out. When it comes to these forms, it's not like you're talking to an accountant who is 100% numbers driven. These guys who are trying to sell their property are going to put their property in the best possible financial light, even if it means omitting little things. Not that it's fraud, but an expense to them might not be an expense to you. If you're going to use property management and they're not, that's your expense. It's not his. There's lots of variables in it. But Kevin, to answer your question, yes, those things can help, but only if the data is true. So you want to make sure that the information you're reviewing is accurate, because a lot of the time it's not. And when they're trying to sell it, they're trying to sell what they want it to be. Never buy a property on pro forma.
last month we talked about buying properties on pro forma for a large multifamily. It doesn't matter what the pro forma says. You have to be able to prove everything you're seeing. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of this, Matt. I'm just going to give an example, right? Let's just say you're looking to buy, and this is type of real estate. Let's say you're looking to buy a laundromat. Laundromats have a lot of cash that could be held, and who knows what they're doing with that cash, right? Maybe they're reporting it wrong, and that could be inaccurate, and that could be actually beneficial to you as a buyer because maybe that's not listed on there, and maybe they wanted to save on some taxes and not report that. But maybe that what's actually reported on the taxes that could cause the income to be lower, and actually you could get a good deal that way. So that's one example of something that could go wrong. So when you're looking at P&L, what are they actually getting in income? You're right. What are they paying in expenses, right? Let's just say you are using a software for maybe you've gone from and let's just say you're not paying a property manager. Maybe you've gone from having 20 units to 50 units, and you want some sort of payment processing. Well, that's going to be another expense. It's exactly how, like Matt said, how you're running your business. You need to run it your way, and you have to make sure that with the things that you have now and the things that you are expecting to have in that P&L report, that's gonna make it that much different. And so, yes, running your numbers is key. So just to now that we've gone over killers of cash flow, let's talk about a couple ways in how to get your cash flow back. And this is kind of hey, maybe it's not all for loss, maybe there's some opportunity that you can see that nobody else sees, right? And so the easiest way is to add some extra revenue streams, right? So let's just say we were talking just about laundromats, but let's just say you have a little bit of laundry in the bottom of in the basement of a property. Maybe it's a 2-unit, and instead of having that actually go to regular laundry, maybe add some coin laundry, right? Maybe getting that extra income could actually help you out. Maybe parking spots, right? Maybe the tenants aren't paying for any parking at the moment. You may be able to add or repurpose those parking spots for some sort of rent. If they have a garage, right? Maybe you can, if it's attached garage, maybe you can insulate that and make it as a living space, and maybe make it another bedroom. Maybe you could rent out the car garage as maybe either a storage space or as just an extra add-on to those who want the garage space. For those who have any kind of storage in the basement or attic, you can get a couple 2x4s and make a pretty easy storage space out of that. And end up charging for the storage space. If there's a shed in the back, maybe you can get some storage there. If there's anything detached with the garage too, maybe you pay someone else for someone to store their stuff for that, and they can pay you a monthly fee. So a lot of things you could do that maybe is a little bit more creative that people aren't really thinking about. Another thing that you want to consider is, do the tenants pay the utilities? There are some landlords that like to give utilities included for the property. Maybe they're paying the cable bill, maybe they're paying the electric and the gas bill, or whatever other bills that may be for utilities. So do the tenants pay? If they don't, maybe it's time that they do, because maybe the cash flow doesn't work for you. But before you do all that, make sure you pay attention to the current lease. If it's included in that lease, you want to figure out when that lease is going to end to repurpose those things. Another thing you could do is, talk with the tenants beforehand, to talk to them about you kind of get a feel for what they're doing, and see if there's a way you can renegotiate that lease as well. So there's a couple different things you can do when you're looking at a property.
Hey,
so
George,
yes,
those 6 items you have bullet pointed could also be extremely good value add to prospective purchase properties. So if you have a property that doesn't have a garage rented with the current tenant or doesn't have utilities split, there's a lot of value there. So when you're looking at homes that have little volume of bedrooms or little volume of bathrooms, you could repurpose that space and think about new ways to create revenue before it becomes a cash flow issue. If it only has one gas meter and one boiler for the whole building of 2 units, put a new gas meter in, put a second boiler, and now all of a sudden it's all out of the landlord's hands. So it's not just for ways to save cash flow. You could really see some significant value added to properties that other people might not see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just about what the property's doing now, it's what the property could be doing. And again, it's all about seeing the value in that. So if you see spaces in that, maybe there's to Matt's point, let's just pretend maybe the place has a mechanical room and in the basement, and let's just say that the basement could be repurposed as a new place. Maybe you build around that kind of mechanical room there, and then make that the space for make the basement into a third unit. There's plenty of things you could do. Now there's all sorts of things that go into that, to have like the recessed windows and everything like that. Those are things you want to look out for when doing that. But if it can be done and you see that could be a huge advantage that you would be willing to do, that would not only improve on the property itself, giving it more living space, but then give you more cash in your pocket. So I like what you said there, Matt. There's definitely room for opportunities there. And then I think that's it. So that is the end of the Cashflow Killers. I wanted to ask and see if anybody had any questions. I just did that good of a job then. Okay, awesome.
Man, I'm telling you, that was extremely thorough. I appreciate all the work you put into that presentation. I know Matt and Rich joined just a little bit ago. Matt, did you have any questions on that? We've talked about a few of those items just recently as this morning. Do you have any questions for George?
Hold on, someone just called for me. Yeah, I tried jotting down everything that was covered. So do you all, for the most part, hire property managers for your properties, or do you guys self-manage, or a bit of both?
I'm currently self-managing my property just because I'm currently house hacking right now. So, but I do have an eventual goal to hire a property manager because more of my time can be used for other business streams that I want to have. So it's a balance of, whether you want your own time to be in it versus not. I've talked to a lot of investors, and I'm not saying that this is like a golden rule or anything, but most of them say at about 5 units or more, I've seen them start looking for property managers, at least start the process. And so, when you have, 3 different lawns to mow, and if that's part of your thing, you could also have single family homes right into the lease. I mean, there's a ton of things you could do, but it just depends on so Matt, what are you looking to buy right now? Are you looking, how many units do you have? What's your situation?
0 units, kind of just getting into it. I've been working with Matt for a little bit now, and right now we're focusing on 1 or 2 units is what I'm looking at right now. But yeah, I mean, just due to where I'm at financially, I would definitely have to self-manage.
Right. Well, I don't know if you probably came in a little bit later, so just kind of reiterate a point that I was making. When you're underwriting your properties, make sure you're underwriting to have a property manager in there, because maybe there'll be a point where you have maybe 10 different properties, maybe 20 units, whatever that may be, and now you have to hire a property manager. So
Include that in the underwriting.
Yeah, include that. And at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're essentially paying yourself
Paying
as a
yourself.
property.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good question though. But yes, I there's definitely value in definitely doing it yourself. You definitely save a lot of money, especially in the beginning, for sure.
Yeah.
But at some point, like we were talking about before the call, George, you might be in your own way doing it because there's only so much property you can manage. And biting the bullet and having someone else do it so you could focus is almost essential at a certain point. Richard and I had a long talk about this last night, and making sure you have a competent professional property management company who sticks to the contract and doesn't nickel and dime is also a huge point, because you have property managers listed as one of the biggest cash flow killers, and you're absolutely right. If they nickel and dime it, Richard has a really good real world scenario of a property management company that took advantage of him, and rightfully so. He got burned, and hard to look past that.
Well, let me talk a little bit about that, because I think that it's important for everyone to know. Matt and I talked extensively about this last night. So I had a 4-unit that I wanted to put out for property management because I didn't want to manage that property. I had other properties that I was self-managing. My single families I self-managed, but the 4-unit was one where I thought might be a good candidate for property management, and I wanted to try it out. So I hired a property management company. Now, given the market that I was in, there were only really 2, maybe 3 property management companies that were advertising, and the one that I chose was the one that had the highest visibility in the markets. So hired the property management company, everything seemed to go well, and they all promise you, now get this, they will all promise you that, you won't need to deal with any of the tenants and everything. And that's largely true, but you will have to deal with them, and they will call you, and they may not call you in the middle of the night. Sometimes they will. I've had that happen. They may call you for things that you wouldn't expect them to be calling you for. And when it comes to the things that they say they include in property management, make sure that includes any dispatches that they do. That's where they get you. That's where it started with me anyway, was they ended up sending people out to look at something based upon a tenant request or complaint or what have you, and they charge me for that dispatch. And that's $25 a pop every time that a guy had to go out there to change a light bulb. Ridiculous. There were some other things too that happened that I didn't expect. They would they do an inspection ahead of time, and they let you know of things that need to be done or what not. They talk about filling empty units in case someone moves out, but they charge you for cleaning the unit before they fill it, and that can be money that you don't expect to spend. The fee that most property managers, at least in my experience, they charge somewhere between 8 and 10%. And when they charge that 8 or 10%, that's for them to collect the rent. And that's generally it. It's not for maintenance items. It's not for things that need to be done that would be par for the course in terms of, taking care of the property, whether it be cutting the grass, trimming the bushes, changing a light bulb. So you want to be careful about when you choose a property management company, what exactly do they do? Do they just collect the rent, and then if someone moves out, put someone else in, but they call you or have you hire someone? They'll say that they have in-house people to do that work, but they're going to charge you for it. And that's a cash flow killer. I can tell you, I probably lost more than I saved by having them. It wasn't necessarily a bad experience. I would say it was an experience. because I made money on the property because of the way I invested it in the first place. So I didn't lose money per se, but I could have made more than I did without having them, or with having the criteria laid out ahead of time, so that they, they did their jobs more efficiently and not had to call me about some of the littlest things. So, it's a give and take relationship. And remember, property management, the business model is opposite of what an investor wants to do. This is why I started or revamped my company into private equities, was to do the management for my investors. That way they don't have to deal with that. You never get a phone call from me unless something burned down or there's an insurance event. So all that is very important. And I just wanted to kind of share with you guys that, property management is going to come into play. And like it was said, 5 properties, 6 properties, when you got that many doors, you need to have somebody looking over it all. And you can't do it. Your time is too valuable. Thanks, Matt.
Is there some kind of predefined checklist that property managers, or do things have to be negotiated before you hire them?
Well, yeah, there's going to be a contract you'll sign, and that contract will lay out everything that they say they will do. What it doesn't say, at least in the one that I had with this particular, and I'm not saying all property management companies are like this, okay? What it doesn't say is the things that specifically they would charge for, like dispatches. It never said anything like that in my disclosures. And I didn't ask the question because I didn't know to ask. My expectation was that if something happens at the property, you need to go out there, you go out there. If nothing's going on, then, it shouldn't cost me anything. That's what I'm paying you your 8 or 10% for, but that wasn't the case. A tenant can call and make a complaint or say that there's something wrong or ask a question that requires them to go out there, and then there's another dispatch. I was charged at one point in time $75 in the same day for 3 different separate dispatches. It was ridiculous. And when I argued the point, they discounted me if I complained, but why did I have to complain?
Yeah, I like what you said about at least when you started with that, that you just started off with a 4 unit. So it's not like you gave them your whole portfolio and said manage it.
Right. No, I wasn't going to do that.
Yeah, I really like that point, because then you can really vet them. They have something that you have to work towards, especially if you have a lot more units, right? And so that way they can at least prove themselves to you, and then if you like them, give them more business. So I like the fact that you did do that when it comes to that. So, and also, obviously you're not going to make as much on the property if you do hire a property manager. It's going to be more of a passive investment, and I wouldn't say there's active and passive. I'd say it's more of a sliding scale, right? I mean, you're going to have to manage the property manager, absolutely, at some point, but you're not managing tenants. And so from a more active to passive, the more you slide that towards passive, I've always found that the return gets a little bit lower, and that's something you'd have to be okay with.
Right.
And the investment of your time, what is that worth? And your peace of mind to not have to answer the call in the middle of the night.
Right.
That was a conversation with Richard last night.
Mm.
Because if you manage your own property, you're on the hook. And if something happens, you're on the hook. Whereas if you have a property management company do it, you get the call for the big stuff, but they still field 99% of it. So as long as they're correct. And like Tom said at the meetup the other night, a good property management company will more than pay for themselves over time. So it's just a matter of relinquishing control, being able to actually let someone else do it, but trusting that it's going to get done. Really good questions. I like this. What else? Anybody have anything else for George, or in general? All the Penn State guys are at home sobbing right now. That was a painful game. Like, they're not joining us today. All right, cool. Richard, do you have anything for the good of the group? I know we talked about a few things here.
No, I think we're good, Matt. I apologize that I came in a little bit late. I was caught up in revamping my website. So, but yeah, it's been great. And I think that, as we go forward in developing, relationships and just remember that everyone's going to want to try and dig in your pocket at some point. You got to be watchful and mindful of that, because that directly affects your cash flow, and just manage the cost, because that's a biggie, is managing the cost of things and adding value. Now, one thing I will say that I do to increase cash flow at my properties is I include internet as a utility, and I charge for it. So that gives me probably another 15-20% margin on my rents, just by including that. And it, it's in a multi-unit, it's a little bit even a little bit easier to do, and you can make a multiplier on that. So, but that's just one of the things that I do. Is everyone needs internet these days, so I include it as a utility, raise the rent. Everyone's happy. No one complains. But other than that, I don't really have anything else to add. I think that I like to thank everyone that joined, and Matt for putting it together. Appreciate it.
Pets, considering pets. I know people are sometimes against pets depending on the situation. They could be a good source of additional income, also could be a good source of additional damage. So each situation and property might be different. But we're looking at ways to throw more money on the table.
By the way, I charge $250 for a pet, per pet, and it has to be under 20 pounds.
And then a monthly fee to keep it.
And a monthly fee to keep it. Yeah, I add on usually like 50 or $100, something like that.
And we were referenced the other night. Let's see, petscreening.com. It is free to landlords. It costs tenants to upload their pet, certify certain things, including vaccinations and all this. Petscreening.com. And it makes them essentially certify that their pet is what they say it is. That's what one of the property management company uses here. And I think that's a really, really good idea. Oh, I have a dog. His name's Smokey or whatever. You just trust that it's true. Give me the vaccination records. But if you're going to rent to people with pets, which we're biased, we love it, because although it is additional cash flow, people who have pets are very limited in where they can move, and they will kind of be driven to your property because you do accept pets, right? You're going to have more of an opportunity to rent to people.
There is one risk to that I would point out. I think that it's a good point, Matt. Thank you for bringing that up. Is people with birds, and you have a multi-unit. If they have birds and it's a loud bird, like a macaw or something like that, that can be a problem in terms of noise. Okay, just be careful of what pets you allow in.
No horses.
No horses. Yeah.
Second floor unit, no horses.
Yeah.
Right on. George, you have any last closing remarks?
Just thank you for having me on and having me going over the Cashflow Killers. I volunteered it last time, and you're like, George, all right, you're up. I made sure that I took that in stride today. Hopefully you guys saw that, and I appreciate the fact that you let me come on and speak. Yeah, you did an awesome job, dude. The presentation, the content, the way you presented it was really, really good. So there's going to be more coming your way. I hope you don't mind. And we'll do the shameless plug for you and what you do outside of this, so it's not a conflict of interest. But George has a lot of experience in the financial world and financial advising. I'm saying it, he's not saying it, specifically for real estate investors. So yeah, his information will be in the bio and in the video. I really appreciate everybody joining us on this Saturday, and hope to see you all in the next one.
Yeah, so. Thanks, George.
Yep. Thank you, George.
Yeah. Thanks, George. Great conversation, everybody.
Yeah, this is good. Really practical. Love it. We'll keep it coming. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Take care. You too. Bye, guys.
Later.